The massive alien ship dwarfed the human vessel as they approached the Galactic Council station. From the viewport of the Aurora *, Dr. Olivia Martinez watched with wide eyes. After years of preparation, humans were finally meeting the galactic community. "Remember everyone, we represent all of Earth today," said Ambassador William Harrington. His calm voice betrayed none of the nervousness he must have felt. Olivia nodded, clutching her sample case tightly. As the ship's xenobiologist, she would study these new alien species, learning everything she could about their biology. Captain Daniel Collins guided the Aurora * into the docking bay with steady hands. "Ambassador, we're ready when you are," he said. The welcoming committee consisted of 7 different alien species. The tallest ones, with blue-tinted skin and elegant robes, stepped forward first. "We welcome Earth to the Galactic Council. I am High Counselor Varric of the Xanthari," the alien said through a translator. "We have watched your species with great interest." Ambassador Harrington bowed slightly. "We are honored to join such an esteemed community." The first meetings went well. The humans were shown to their quarters and given time to rest before formal talks began. Olivia spent this time organizing her lab equipment. Later, at the welcome banquet, things began to change. "So your species only lives for 80 cycles?" asked a Xanthari scientist named Liran. The alien tilted its head in what seemed like pity. "On average, yes," Olivia replied. "Though many live past 100 now with our medical advances." Liran made a strange clicking sound that the translator interpreted as laughter. "How fascinating. The Xanthari typically live 500 to 700 years. I myself am 342. Olivia tried to hide her surprise. "That's remarkable. I'd love to study the cellular mechanisms that allow such longevity." "Of course," Liran said with a dismissive wave. "Though I wonder how your kind accomplishes anything with such fleeting lives." Similar conversations happened around the room. Captain Collins approached Olivia with a tight expression. "Having fun?" he asked quietly. "They seem fixated on our lifespans," she replied. Collins nodded. "One of them asked if we had time to learn to read before we died." Over the next few days, the pattern continued. During formal council meetings, the aliens, especially the Xanthari, treated the humans with a strange mix of interest and condescension. "The ephemeral species brings up an interesting point," one council member said after Ambassador Harrington presented Earth's proposal for trade. Another time, a Xanthari official suggested, perhaps humans should be classified as ephemeral sentients rather than full council members. Their perspective is necessarily limited by their brief existence. Captain Collins had nearly walked out of that meeting. Only a sharp look from the ambassador had kept him in his seat. Meanwhile, Olivia was making progress in her lab work. The council had allowed her to collect cell samples from voluntary donors of each species. As she examined the Xanthari cells under her microscope, something caught her eye. "That's odd," she muttered to herself. The cells showed patterns she couldn't quite identify. They divided differently than human cells, moved differently. She made careful notes, planning to compare them with the other species. One evening, Ambassador Harrington called the human delegation together. "It's been 2 weeks," he said. "I think we all recognize that we're facing some challenges in how we're perceived." "They treat us like children," Captain Collins said bluntly. "Or pets," added Lieutenant Kelly from security. Harrington nodded. "Nevertheless, we need this alliance. Earth needs the protection and technology the Council can provide." Olivia raised her hand slightly. "I've been noticing something in my research. Nothing concrete yet, but their cells behave differently than ours. I need more time to understand what it means." "Take all the time you need, Doctor," Harrington said. "In the meantime, we'll continue diplomatic efforts. If the Xanthari want to laugh at our lifespans, let them laugh. We'll prove our worth through action." As the meeting ended, Olivia returned to her lab. The cell samples waited under her microscope. Something important hid in those alien patterns, something that might change everything. She just needed to find it. 6 months had passed since Earth joined the Galactic Council. The human embassy on the Council station was small but functional. Dr. Olivia Martinez had transformed her assigned quarters into a makeshift lab, filled with samples and equipment. She looked up as Dr. Eric Bennett entered, carrying new slides. "Any luck?" he asked, setting down a cup of coffee for her. Earth had introduced coffee to the station, one of the few human contributions the aliens actually appreciated. "Not yet," Olivia said, "but I know there's something unusual about these cellular patterns." Outside the lab, Earth's position in the Council had not improved. The patronizing attitude from the Xanthari and other long-lived species had only grown worse. Commander Samantha Griffin experienced this daily. As Earth's representative to the Galactic Defense Force, she trained alongside aliens from 20 different worlds. At 42, she was considered one of Earth's most experienced military strategists. To the aliens, she was practically a child. "Humans, please group with the Navari cadets," the Xanthari instructor called out during that day's exercise. Samantha frowned. The Navari were known for their physical strength, but were considered tactically simple by Council standards. "Sir, with respect, I've been a military commander for 15 years, she said. The instructor made that clicking sound that Samantha now recognized as condescending laughter. 15 years. How adorable. "I've been teaching military strategy for 200 years, young one." Samantha bit her tongue and joined the Navari group. The exercise was a battle simulation, defending a space station against surprise attack. While the other groups carefully discussed slow, methodical responses, Samantha quickly organized the Navari. "We don't need to wait for perfect information," she told them. "Split into 3 teams, secure these key points, and adapt as new data comes in." When the simulation ended, Samantha's team had successfully defended the station with minimal losses. The instructor looked surprised. "Impressive efficiency," he admitted reluctantly. "Though, of course, we see this often in short-lived species. When one has so little time, one must rush through life's experiences." A young Navari spoke up. But Commander Griffin's strategy was superior. Why dismiss it because of her species? The instructor waved away the question. "You'll understand when you're older." Back at the embassy, Ambassador Harrington was dealing with similar problems. The Council had assigned a Xanthari advisor to the humans, an elderly alien named Drez who treated Harrington like a student rather than a diplomat. "Your proposal for trade routes is ambitious for such a young species," Drez said during their meeting. "Perhaps in a century or two, when you've gained wisdom." "Earth doesn't have a century to wait," Harrington replied firmly. "Our resources are limited, and we need these trade agreements now." Drez smiled in that way all Xanthari did when humoring humans. "So hasty. This is why ephemeral species struggle with galactic politics. You lack the long view." That evening, the human delegation met for dinner in their private dining room. The mood was tense. 6 months, and they still won't take us seriously, Captain Collins said, stabbing at his food. Commander Griffin nodded. "Today I was told my tactical success was only because humans are desperate to accomplish something before we die." Ambassador Harrington sighed. "We need to be patient. Building respect takes time." "Time they think we don't have," Collins muttered. Olivia had been quiet, but now she looked up. "I may have found something interesting. Dr. Bennett and I have been studying the cognitive patterns in alien brain tissue samples." "And?" Harrington asked. "Despite their long lives, most Council species show signs of cognitive stagnation in what we call extended middle age. Their neural pathways become fixed, less adaptable." "Meaning?" Commander Griffin leaned forward. "Meaning they live longer, but their minds become more rigid. Humans don't show this pattern. We maintain neural plasticity throughout our lives." Dr. Bennett added, "It's preliminary, but it suggests that while they have more years, they might experience less actual growth and change during those years." "Could this help our position?" Harrington asked. Olivia shook her head. Not yet. We need more evidence, but it might explain why they seem so resistant to new ideas. As the humans discussed what this might mean, a Xanthari aide entered to deliver a message. The council requests a human participant for an emergency medical situation. The aide said, "There has been an accident, and they need a species with rapid healing capabilities." The humans exchanged glances. This was unexpected, and possibly their first opportunity to demonstrate human value beyond the Council's limited understanding. Ambassador Harrington walked quickly through the Council chambers, following the Xanthari aide. He had been in a heated debate about Earth's resource rights when a minor accident occurred. A falling decorative panel had cut his arm. It wasn't serious, just a small gash that had already stopped bleeding. But the Council meeting had erupted into chaos. "This way, Ambassador," the aide said, leading him to the medical wing. "Grand Scientist Sill wishes to examine your injury." Harrington sighed. "It's just a cut. I don't see why everyone is making such a fuss." The medical wing was unexpectedly crowded. Several alien scientists hovered near the entrance, trying to appear casual and failing. As Harrington entered, a tall, thin Xanthari with pale blue skin approached. "Ambassador, I am Grand Scientist Sill," he said with a slight bow. "May I examine your wound?" Harrington rolled up his sleeve, revealing the small cut. It had already formed a scab. Sill's eyes widened. "Fascinating. The injury occurred less than 30 minutes ago, correct?" "Yes, that's right. And it has already stopped bleeding and begun healing." Sill leaned closer, examining the wound with an instrument that emitted a soft blue light. "That's normal for humans," Harrington explained. "Small cuts heal quickly." Sill looked up, his expression unreadable. "Not for other species, Ambassador. A Xanthari with this injury would still be bleeding. Full healing would take days." Later that evening, Harrington reported the strange incident to the human delegation. "They want to study our healing abilities," he said. "Grand Scientist Sill has formally requested permission to conduct research on human biology." Dr. Martinez frowned. "I don't like the sound of that. They've been dismissive of us for months, and suddenly they're interested." "I share your concern," Harrington said. "That's why I told Sill we would agree only if you lead the research team, Olivia." Dr. Bennett looked worried. "Do we really want to give them information about our biology? They might use it against us somehow." Captain Collins nodded. "I agree. We don't know enough about their intentions." "I understand your worries," Harrington said, "but this could be our opportunity to gain some respect in the Council. Besides, they seem genuinely surprised by our healing abilities. I think we've stumbled onto something important." 2 days later, Dr. Martinez found herself in a large laboratory with Grand Scientist Sill and 3 other alien scientists. They had set up a series of experiments to study human cellular regeneration. "We will begin with basic tissue samples," Sill announced. The test started simply enough. Skin cell cultures, blood analysis, controlled minor abrasions that volunteers allowed to be monitored as they healed. Olivia insisted on complete transparency. Any test performed on humans would also be performed on willing alien volunteers for comparison. The results were surprising even to Olivia. Human cells regenerated 5 to 10 times faster than Xanthari cells. Human immune responses activated almost instantly, while alien immune systems took hours to begin working. After a week of tests, Olivia sat in her lab reviewing the data. Something deeper was happening, something beyond simple healing rates. "Dr. Martinez," Sill said, entering the lab quietly, "I wish to show you something." He placed 2 sample dishes under a specialized microscope. The left is human tissue. The right is Xanthari. Watch what happens when I introduce entropy-increasing radiation. Olivia looked through the eyepiece. The difference was dramatic. The Xanthari cells gradually surrendered to the damage, breaking down in an orderly fashion. The human cells, however, fought back, reorganizing, adapting, trying multiple repair strategies simultaneously. I've never seen anything like this, Kizel said softly. Your cells don't just repair, they innovate. What does this mean? Olivia asked. Sill's voice was barely a whisper. It means, Doctor, that your species has a unique relationship with entropy itself. While we accept the universe's decay as inevitable, your cells rage against it. Olivia felt a chill. And this is unusual. In my 400 years studying xenobiology, I have never seen anything like it, Kizel replied. We need to expand this research immediately. That night, Olivia couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about what Kizel had said. Was this why the aliens lived so long yet accomplished so little? Was there something fundamental about human biology that made them different? She opened her computer and began a new research protocol. It was time to look beyond physical healing and examine something even more basic, the speed at which different species experience time itself. 2 weeks had passed since the healing discovery. Dr. Olivia Martinez rarely left the lab now. Sleep came in short naps on a cot she had set up in the corner. Food arrived on trays, often going cold before she remembered to eat. Dr. Bennett walked in, carrying fresh coffee and looking worried. Olivia, you need to rest. She shook her head. Not yet. Look at this. On her screen, a complex set of graphs showed neural firing patterns for 5 different species. The blue line is human, she explained. The red is Xantheri. The others are the Navari, Galth, and Taurillian species. See the difference? Eric leaned closer. The human line shows more frequent spikes. Exactly. Human neurons fire at nearly triple the rate of Xantheri neurons. Our brains process information much faster than theirs. Eric sat down. So what does this mean? I wasn't sure until I ran these other tests. Olivia pulled up more data. I've been measuring metabolic rates, cellular replacement cycles, and information processing speeds. Everything points to the same conclusion. She took a deep breath. The aliens aren't living longer lives, Eric. They're living slower ones. Eric stared at her. What? Think about it. Their heart rates are slower. Their neural processes are slower. Everything about their biology is slower. Olivia's eyes were bright with excitement and lack of sleep. They experience time differently than we do. Eric needed a moment to process this. You're saying they live for 700 years because they're moving in slow motion compared to us. Not exactly slow motion, but yes. If we calculate the number of heartbeats, neural firings, cell divisions, any measure of biological activity, a 700-year-old Xantheri has experienced roughly the same amount as an 80-year-old human. The implications were staggering. Eric paced the small lab. So in terms of actual experiences, humans pack more life into our years. Olivia finished. We think faster, heal faster, adapt faster. The lab door opened, and Ambassador Harrington entered with Grand Scientist Siddle. Olivia quickly minimized her screens. Dr. Martinez, Harrington said, Grand Scientist Sill has requested an update on your research. Olivia hesitated. She wasn't ready to share her full theory yet. We're making progress understanding the differences in healing rates. Sill's eyes narrowed slightly. You seem to be exploring neural activity patterns as well. Just being thorough, Olivia said carefully. Harrington sensed the tension. Perhaps we should bring in additional expertise. Dr. Natalie Wright from our delegation is a psychologist. She might offer valuable insights. Sill agreed, though reluctantly. By the next day, Dr. Wright had joined the research team. Her expertise in human consciousness added a new dimension to the work. These results are fascinating, Natalie said after reviewing the data. It's not just about biology. It affects experience itself. She designed a series of tests to measure experiential time, how different species perceive the passage of moments. The results confirmed Olivia's theory. In the time, a Xantheri experienced one emotional state. Humans experienced 5 or 6. Where Xantheri formed one memory, humans formed dozens. Look at creativity measures, Natalie pointed out. In art therapy sessions, humans produce more varied and novel works in an hour than Xinthuri do in a week. The research team expanded their testing. Every metric told the same story. Humans lived faster, more intense lives. Their minds adapted more quickly, their emotions flowed more readily, their experiences were richer. One evening, Ambassador Harrington visited the lab alone. "Give me the truth, Olivia. What have you found?" Olivia showed him everything, the data, the conclusions, the implications. "So when they laugh at our short lives," Harrington began. "They're wrong," Olivia finished. "By any meaningful measure of lived experience, we might actually outlive them." Harrington was quiet for a long moment. "This changes everything, doesn't it?" "It should," Olivia agreed. "But will they accept it? Their entire culture is built on the belief that longer lives mean superior wisdom. This undermines that completely. We need to present these findings to the full council," Harrington decided. "They'll fight it," Olivia warned. "This truth threatens their entire worldview." "Perhaps," Harrington said with a small smile. "But we humans have always been good at fighting, haven't we?" As Olivia began organizing her research for the council presentation, she wondered how the aliens would react when they learned they weren't superior beings looking down on short-lived humans. They were simply experiencing less life, spread over more years. The Grand Council chamber was filled to capacity. Word had spread that the humans were presenting important research findings. Many came out of curiosity, others to witness what they expected would be another example of human naivety. Dr. Olivia Martinez stood at the center of the chamber, surrounded by her research team. Dr. Eric Bennett, Dr. Natalie Wright, and Ambassador Harrington, Captain Collins, and Commander Griffin sat in the front row for moral support. "Esteemed council members," Olivia began, her voice steady despite her nerves. "For the past month, we have conducted extensive research on the biological differences between humans and other council species." High Counselor Varric of the Xinthuri nodded indulgently. "Yes, your rapid healing abilities are quite remarkable for such a short-lived species." Olivia took a deep breath. "Our research has revealed something far more significant than healing rates. We have discovered a fundamental difference in how our species experience time itself." The chamber grew quiet. Grand Scientist Sill leaned forward in his seat, eyes narrowed. Olivia activated the main display, showing her data. "These charts demonstrate that human cellular processes, neural activity, and metabolic functions operate at significantly faster rates than those of other council species." Dr. Wright stepped forward. "And these psychological measurements show that humans process information, form memories, and experience emotions at rates 3 to 5 times faster than the Xinthuri." Murmurs spread through the chamber. Some aliens looked confused, others uncomfortable. "What exactly are you suggesting, Dr. Martinez?" asked Counselor Varric. "We are suggesting, Counselor, that humans don't have shorter lives. We have faster, richer ones." Olivia's voice grew stronger. "By every subjective measure, humans experience more life in our 80 years than the Xinthuri do in 700. The chamber erupted in outcries. Many council members stood, speaking all at once. Varric had to pound his ceremonial staff 3 times to restore order. "This is absurd," declared a Galth representative. "You cannot redefine longevity to suit your species' obvious shortcoming." Dr. Bennett displayed another chart. "We're not redefining anything. We're measuring actual lived experience. In the time it takes a Xinthuri to make 1 decision, a human can make 3. In the time a Xinthuri learns 1 new skill, a human masters 5. Grand Scientist Sill finally spoke, his voice cold. "This research is fundamentally flawed. You cannot equate neural firing rates with lived experience. Quantity is not quality." "We anticipated that objection," Dr. Wright replied. "So we measured quality too. Creative output, emotional depth, formation of meaningful relationships. By all these measures, humans experience more in less time." Ambassador Harrington stepped forward. "Members of the council, We came here today not to claim superiority, but to ask for a revaluation of how we measure life. Perhaps years are not the only metric worth considering. Counselor Varick's face had hardened. Ambassador, while we appreciate your creative interpretation of the data, this presentation appears to be nothing more than an attempt to compensate for your species' obvious inferiority in lifespan. The data speaks for itself, Olivia insisted. Data can be manipulated. Khalil responded. I move that this research be dismissed and funding for these studies be immediately terminated. A vote was called. Only 3 species voted in support of the humans, while 15 voted against them. The motion passed easily. This council session is adjourned, Varick announced, standing abruptly. As the aliens filed out, Captain Collins approached the research team. That went about as well as expected. Olivia watched the retreating council members, noticing how some of the younger aliens looked back at the humans with curious expressions. Did you see their faces? Not all of them rejected our findings. The older ones certainly did, Ambassador Harrington said. They seemed almost afraid of what we were suggesting, because it threatens their entire worldview. Dr. Wright observed. If we're right, their longer lives don't automatically grant them greater wisdom or experience. So what now? Asked Dr. Bennett. Ambassador Harrington's expression was determined. We continue our research privately. We reach out to those who seemed receptive, and we wait for an opportunity to prove our theory in a way they can't ignore. As they left the chamber, a young Xanthari aide approached them carefully. Dr. Martinez, several junior scientists would like to discuss your findings. Unofficially, of course. Olivia smiled. Perhaps the revelation hadn't been completely rejected after all. Tell them I'd be happy to meet. 2 weeks after the council rejected their research, the humans continued their work quietly. Dr. Martinez had regular meetings with curious young alien scientists. These meetings were unofficial, but word was spreading. Commander Samantha Griffin was in the Galactic Defense Force Command Center when the emergency alert came in. A hostile species from beyond Council space had attacked the human colony on Proxima Beta. We need immediate assistance, said the colony governor over the static-filled transmission. They came without warning. Our defenses won't hold for long. The Galactic Defense Force Admiral, a Xanthari named Lorix, called an emergency meeting. We must follow proper protocols, Admiral Lorix announced to the gathered commanders. First, we will form an assessment committee to evaluate the threat level. Commander Griffin stepped forward. Admiral, with respect, the colony has less than 5,000 people and minimal defenses. They need help now, not after a committee meeting. Admiral Lorix frowned. Commander Griffin, I understand your species tends to react hastily, but proper military response requires careful planning. How long will this assessment take? Griffin asked. The committee should reach a decision within 3 to 4 days, the Admiral replied. Griffin couldn't believe what she was hearing. 3 to 4 days. The colony will be destroyed by then. This is how the Galactic Defense Force has operated for centuries, Lorix said firmly. It has served us well. Griffin looked around the room. Some of the younger officers looked uncomfortable, but none spoke up. Admiral, I formally request permission to leave a human fleet to defend our colony, Griffin said. Request denied, Lorix replied immediately. No military action will be taken without proper authorization from the committee. Griffin saluted stiffly and left the command center. She went straight to the human embassy where Captain Collins was waiting. The Defense Force won't help, Collins asked when she told him what happened. Not for days. By then it will be too late. Collins nodded. I thought this might happen. I've already put our ships on alert. The Aurora is ready, along with 3 other human vessels. Going against the Council's orders could damage our standing, Griffin warned. Standing? Collins laughed bitterly. What standing? They ignore our research, mock our lifespans, and now they'll let our people die while they form committees. Ambassador Harrington entered the room, his face grim. I just heard about the attack. The Council refuses to call an emergency session. We're going to help our colony, Collins told him. With or without permission. Harrington was quiet for a moment. You understand this could have serious consequences for Earth's position in the Council. I do, Griffin said. But I won't let our people die because the aliens think we have all the time in the world to make decisions. Then go, Harrington decided. I'll deal with the political fallout. Within an hour, 4 human ships broke away from the Council station and jumped into hyperspace. Commander Griffin stood on the bridge of the Aurora planning their strategy. We'll arrive in 18 hours, she told her crew. The colony needs to hold out until then. When they arrived at Proxima Beta, the situation was dire. Half the colony was in flames. The attackers, a reptilian species called the Vrex, had landed ground forces and were moving toward the main settlement. Standard Council procedure would be to establish orbit and begin diplomatic communications, Griffin told her officers. But we don't have time for that. Instead, she split her forces. 2 ships engaged the Vrex vessels in orbit, while Griffin led a rapid ground assault to cut off the Vrex forces already on the planet. The battle was fierce. The Vrex fought well, but they couldn't match the speed of human decision-making and adaptation. When the Vrex changed tactics, Griffin's forces responded immediately. When the Vrex brought in new weapons, the humans quickly found countermeasures. 8 hours into the battle, 3 Galactic Defense Force ships finally arrived. Admiral Lorax watched in shock as the human forces, heavily outnumbered, pushed the Vrex back from the colony. How? He asked as Griffin's team secured the final Vrex position. How did you defeat them so quickly? Griffin was exhausted and covered in dirt, but she stood tall. Because we didn't have the luxury of waiting, Admiral. For humans, time has always been precious. As the Vrex retreated from the system, Griffin knew she would face consequences for defying orders. But watching the grateful faces of the colonists, she couldn't bring herself to regret it. This battle had proven something important. Sometimes, having less time made you fight harder for every second. Commander Griffin stood before the Galactic Council, her uniform neat despite her exhaustion. 3 days had passed since the battle at Proxima Beta. She was officially here to face charges for disobeying direct orders. The human ships left without authorization, Admiral Lorax stated. Commander Griffin knowingly violated our protocols. High Counselor Varric nodded gravely. This is a serious offense. What do you have to say for yourself, Commander? Griffin looked around the room. Many of the aliens who had dismissed human research weeks ago now avoided her eyes. I did what was necessary to save lives, she said simply. While your committee was still being formed, we saved 4,893 people. The council chamber fell silent. No one could deny the colony had been saved, even if they disagreed with Griffin's methods. Unexpectedly, Dr. Olivia Martinez walked into the chamber with Grand Scientist Xil beside her. Xil looked uncomfortable. Counselors, if I may, Martinez said. I've made an important discovery that directly relates to this situation. Varric frowned. This is a disciplinary hearing, not a scientific forum. Please, Counselor, Xil said, surprising everyone. What Dr. Martinez has found is significant. Varric reluctantly agreed. Proceed, but be brief. Martinez activated a large display showing cellular samples. When I first began studying alien biology, something bothered me, but I couldn't identify what. Now I understand. She showed 2 sets of genetic samples side by side. The left is from Xanthari tissue dating back 1 million years. The right is current Xanthari DNA. They're almost identical, Ambassador Harrington observed from his seat. Exactly, Martinez said. Unlike humans, who show clear evolutionary adaptation over even short periods, the longer-lived species show almost no adaptation over millions of years. Murmurs spread through the chamber. Xil stepped forward. I verified Dr. Martinez's findings, he admitted reluctantly. Our species resists change, both biologically and culturally. What does this have to do with Commander Griffin's actions? Varric demanded. Everything, Martins replied. Our research shows that in crisis situations, humans can make decisions and adapt 5 times faster than Xanthari. This isn't just about neural firing rates, it's about our entire approach to existence. Ambassador Harrington rose from his seat. I request an emergency demonstration that will settle this matter once and for all. Varric looked ready to refuse, but the other council members were curious. What demonstration? Harrington nodded to Dr. Wright, who brought forward a device. This is a temporal perception test. It measures how different species experience the passage of time. With the council's reluctant approval, volunteers from each species took the test. The results were displayed on the main screen for all to see. In the time it takes a Xanthari to process one decision, Wright explained, a human processes 5. In the time a Galth experiences one emotional state, a human experiences 6. The evidence was undeniable. The chamber buzzed with shocked conversations. A young Xanthari counselor spoke up. If this is true, then humans experience more in their short lives than we do in our long ones. That's exactly right, Martins said. We don't have less time. We have more life in our time. Varric looked shaken. This changes nothing about Commander Griffin's insubordination. But the mood in the chamber had shifted. A Navari counselor stood. I disagree. The commander acted within her species' natural temporal framework. She should be commended, not punished. More counselors joined in support. Even some Xanthari sided with Griffin. Finally, a vote was called. By a narrow margin, Griffin was cleared of all charges. As the session ended, Harrington approached Varric. High Counselor, we propose a new classification system for council species, one that measures experiential richness rather than just chronological time. Varric studied the human with new respect. Such a proposal would face strong opposition. But not universal opposition, Harrington noted, gesturing to the younger counselors who were eagerly discussing the new ideas. Later, the human delegation gathered in their embassy to celebrate. So they can't laugh at our lifespans anymore, Captain Collins said, raising a glass. Dr. Martinez smiled. No. In fact, some are beginning to envy us. What happens now? Griffin asked. Ambassador Harrington looked thoughtful. Now we build a new relationship with the Council, one based on the understanding that the true measure of life isn't how long you exist, but how fully you exist in each moment.